let us assume there are cuts coming. I want to hear what your ideas are for where those cuts could be most effective. Do we reform the whole system? Do we slice? And if so, where? Where could these happen? How could we do more with less?
We should reform the whole system.
Okay, so give me some ideas on that front.
We shouldn't be operating off the Foreign Assistance Act, which is older than I am, and that's saying something. The Foreign Assistance Act could be rewritten. I would love to see that.
22 years old?
Yes, 24, please. The Foreign Assistance Act is a great place to start. Every single chairman, no matter what party of the Foreign Relations Committee, the House Foreign Affairs Committee, that's come in and said, this is what I want to do, they haven't done it. People say, oh no, it's been updated. I'm sorry, I don't know how many of you pay attention to it. We don't really know how many volumes it is anymore because we don't see volumes anymore, but when I left the Hill 15 years ago, it was 6 or 8. It's highly inefficient, and in that sense, I think a lot of the earmarking, the special interests, the carve-outs, the way we do business, it actually does parallel the Pentagon, which is that it is crippled by our lawmakers. I'm actually a big fan of earmarks because I think they bring out into the open what it is that people are calling for. So I think Congress made a big mistake in pulling them out. I think those are things that need to be addressed. I do believe that we should be pulling AID further into the Department of State. I realize that for those who don't love the Department of State, that's a difficult thing. But in fact, it is hard to make a case to the American people that our assistance should not be tied to our policy exigencies, and our policy people are at the Department of State. Not that AID is not supporting policy, but I don't think that they're bound close enough. These are among the things that could be done. We discussed this in the green room, we could get rid of all the bloody special envoys. Every single workaround that exists because there's money or because someone's carved it out should be addressed in a way that streamlines these agencies and maximizes the money for doing things rather than for paying for people. So there's a concrete suggestion.
Exactly right, I agree. And it may be that one reason you're seeing a slowness in filling positions is that the administration is looking for a big overhaul of the state organization chart, which we have suggested to eliminate all the special envoys, which have a diluting effect really on the efficiency, the effectiveness, and the organization of state itself, where I spent 25 years. And so I think that the regional bureaus need to be back in charge, I think, and the functional bureaus need to be pared back drastically. AID needs to be incorporated at the desk officer level, and you can have a new cone called Economic Development Cone, where people who are expert at giving grants and that sort of thing. You don't have to have a whole separate structure. That'll save a lot of money. If you're worried about this draconian cut, that's one way to save money that's not going to impact. Another thing is food security. The food security, get rid of the Jones Act, get rid of the demands that our food be delivered on U.S. ships, U.S. crews, have a lot more food available to help people in humanitarian situations.
Right.
Yeah, and I certainly agree on the food aid reform, and that's a battle that left and right have joined together to fight in this town, and hopefully we can make some progress on that. As I said, I think we could be a lot less disparate in how we handle aid and hand it out. But I think that there's an important lesson here in looking at how reform is handled. DoD is really good at a lot of things because they train their people to do it. Average officer spends about 20-25% of their career being trained for specific operations. At the State Department, we invest far less in training. Most Foreign Service officers get very de minimis training, even in diplomacy. And they've had zero training in development. And thinking that we can just hand them the keys to development and that it'll work well is a fool's errand. We have a lonely Secretary of State right now. I don't know how, after reading the stories of the last couple of weeks, where we've got a Secretary of State that isn't staffed well enough to know that press pays their own way on the plane, and could kind of come out and say, well, we're not taking press because it'll save money. An obvious blunder, an easily avoidable blunder. Why we're going to hand this guy right now another agency to manage with a bunch of officers and Foreign Service officers in state who are lousy at managing money and have no experience in development and think that's going to work well? I think that will replicate the provisional authority in Iraq, where we put a bunch of people in charge who'd never done this stuff, and it ended disastrous.
Isn't training Foreign Service officers better in development going to cost more money? How's that going to save money?
Yeah, no, that's the other thing, is that one of the dirty secrets of managing change in the U.S. government is it's expensive to move people around. It's expensive to fire people. A 37% cut is going to mean a reduction in force, almost assuredly. And you know what you get with a reduction in force? You get to fire all the smart young people in your agency. And you get to keep those who are older, who've been around a long time, and have more civil service protections. And it means over time that you've got some very junior employees, some very senior employees, and you've got no middle. You have to pay buyout packages. It's very hard to manage.
Okay, that's the problem. What's the solution to that?
Is to actually approach managing budget reductions with a plan that employee freezes are not helpful. You want to bring some people on. You want to figure out attrition. You want to figure out your priority areas. And you need to consult on the Hill. None of this stuff was consulted on the Hill. So we're going to have people who care about PEPFAR, people who care about malaria, people who care about kids' education. It's going to play out as a classic special interest battle on the Hill.
Scott?
I agree with.
So let me offer a couple more ideas for cost efficiency. But on this point, I mean, the other thing I would say about how you're organizing things, the USAID state relationship, let's recognize that under the most robust autonomous development agency model, it is never going to be on equal footing, sort of in an interagency process with the Secretary of State. So, I simply don't have the worry that somehow our development agency is off doing its own thing in a way that's not aligned with national interests. And then, frankly, if you move to a model where it is folded back in, setting aside all the practical problems, you do risk losing what has developed as really a credible and important policy voice in interagency discussions. And I certainly saw this in my participation in these kinds of conversations, that you do sometimes need that agency to stand up and say, no, that's a dumb idea to do a project like that in a country like that. It's not going to work, when there may be some broader imperative of engagement. But you do need the development actor in there trying to do their best to move the discussion toward questions of effectiveness.